You know, 30 years ago, I was part of something very, very special. Something that turned into a global phenomenon.
He was the most famous wrestler in America. And he was indestructible, unstoppable, and untouchable. What if what you thought you knew about Hulk Hogan was merely the tip of the iceberg when it came to a deeper, more agonizing truth? What truly happened in those last days when the cameras stopped rolling and the story sank into silence? Stick around until the end, because what was discovered after his death will leave you absolutely stunned. Before the bell fell silent, he was more than just a wrestler. Hulk Hogan was a living example of strength. Fans saw the mustache, bandana, and muscles that made stadiums full of cheers. But behind the scenes, his body was slowly and terribly falling apart. Years of slamming giants and carrying heavy things were very hard on them. He had more than 25 surgeries by 2023, and each one left scars that were worse than the last. His back was giving him the most trouble. Because of years of abuse to his spine, he had to have 10 complicated surgeries just to stay standing. Even after the fixes, the pain never went away. He kept going out in public even though each step was harder than the last. He did this to hide the cost of being a celebrity. He was still the hero to everyone else, but inside, he was breaking down. Behind closed doors, Hogan's life was not at all exciting. He needed help with everyday things like getting ready and going down the stairs. By the end of 2023, his legs were going numb, and doctors told him it might not go away. He joked and smiled in interviews, but his eyes showed something else. He was in pain, but didn't want his friends to see how weak he was. He used a cane, but it didn't show up on camera very often. During events, he stood tall for a while but fell down in pain as soon as no one could see him. He missed family events and calls from friends on days when he couldn't get out of bed. Not because of fame, but because of the pain that wouldn't go away, he became more alone. People who knew him well started to notice changes, but not many knew how bad things had gotten. Early in 2024, doctors told Hogan some bad news. He might never be able to walk without help again. Friends and fans didn't know about this. Not even people close to him knew how serious it was. He spent most of his days in his Florida home, stuck in a chair and having a hard time getting from one room to another. Physical training didn't seem to help, and painkillers didn't seem to help much either. He still wouldn't openly admit defeat, though. Later, a nurse who looked for him behind his back said that his daily battle was heartbreaking. After fighting in front of thousands of people, Hogan sat alone and watched his past on TV. Things like photos, belts, and medals were all over his room, but none of them made him feel better. He almost never left the house because he had to stick to a strict routine of therapy, rest, and silence. The well-liked hero was getting ready for a different kind of battle. Up until now, this part of his story had never been told in full. In 2024, private papers showed that Hogan had been diagnosed with a rare nerve disorder that was linked to damage to his spine. It took him a long time to lose his balance and movement, and there was no cure in sight. To keep his fans from seeing how bad things were getting, he decided to suffer in silence instead of telling everyone. Even his closest friends and family didn't know the whole truth until after he died. This secret illness explained why he stopped going to big events all of a sudden. He didn't want to trip and fall in front of everyone or look weak in public. Hogan's pride was tied to how people saw him, and it hurt more to let go of that than the surgeries. He made peace with his legacy as his illness got worse, but he kept the truth hidden. It wasn't until after he died that everyone knew how bad his health problems were. Behind the fame and muscles was a man slowly breaking, physically, mentally, and emotionally, and no one saw it coming. The rise was never meant to last. There weren't any bright lights when Terry Bollea was a kid. His name was Shy, and he lived alone in Tampa most of the time. He didn't have much money and felt less confident. He went to bars and played the bass guitar as a way to escape. He dreamed of bigger things, but it wasn't until he was in his early 20s that he found professional wrestling, which would change his life. Wrestling gave him a reason to live. He worked out very hard and made his body look like it was made of metal. In the beginning, he wasn't flashy. He was just focused. But something clicked for Vince McMahon Sr. when he saw him. He changed his name to Hulk Hogan, and Terry Bollea slowly faded behind the figure. By the early 1980s, Hogan's character had become a huge part of popular culture. Kids copied his poses and wore bandanas and torn shirts. He stopped being just a fighter and turned into a brand. There were toys, movies on Saturday mornings, and even breakfast cereal. People became crazy about Hulk, and it spread far beyond the wrestling ring. He was in movies, was the main event at WrestleMania, and made a lot of money. He stood for bravery, honesty, and pride in being an American. Fans thought he could not be stopped. Behind the scenes, though, the actor who played Hulk was coming apart. It got harder to tell the difference between the act and real life faster than anyone thought. As Hulk Hogan, you could never show weakness. Terry was not tired, sick, or sad. He had to smile, move, and say catchphrases over and over for the cameras and fans. Every minute of his life was planned, and he didn't know how to say no. His sleep schedule was also based on flights, appearances, and television appearances all the time. He was a superhero in public. He started to crack when he was alone. The real man inside him felt less important than the role he played. With each year that went by, the pressure grew. It got too heavy to carry in the end. Hogan was on a high after making No Holds Barred in 1989. Fans never saw what happened, though. He locked himself in his caravan and cried after a long day on the job. He finally stated that he had lost track of who he was after many years. The pain wasn't physical. It was losing who you were. He said that the Hulk mask had completely taken over. Everyone thought he would always be loud, strong, and full of energy. Terry, on the other hand, felt sad. He hid the fact that he was depressed from everyone, even his best friends. Inside, the strongest man in the world felt very weak. Becoming Hulk Hogan gave Terry everything: money, fame, and love from a lot of people. It took more than it gave, though. He lost a lot of peace, his privacy, and his personality. He didn't know if people liked him or just the part he played. Every mirror showed him that Terry Bollea was not in charge anymore. The unraveling of a legend. Hulk Hogan seemed to have everything by 2005. Fans got a front-row ticket to his family life on his reality show, Hogan Knows Best. But things were falling apart behind the scenes. His marriage to Linda was already in trouble, full of stress and distance. The house that seemed flawless was progressively falling apart from the inside out. Things became worse in 2007 when his son Nick was in a car accident that hurt one of his friends badly. The news coverage was harsh, making Hogan look like an irresponsible celebrity and an absent father. Brooke's music career hit a wall, and their once close relationship started to deteriorate. Linda filed for divorce as the household fell apart, and things turned ugly very quickly. What happened next wasn't simply a breakup. It was a public conflict that was all over the tabloids. Hogan's emotions and finances took a big hit. He lost millions in the divorce, including homes and other things he had worked hard to build for years. The man who used to stand tall in front of crowds now felt alone behind closed doors. He said in interviews that he had a hard struggle with sadness and bad thoughts throughout this time. He had nowhere to go but solitude and regret. Then the last strike came. In 2015, records of Hogan using racial insults in private recordings were revealed. The video shocked the globe and ruined what was left of his reputation. WWE took him out of their Hall of Fame. His name disappeared from products, ads, and history books nearly right away. Immediately, sponsors dropped him. Friends and famous wrestlers stopped calling. Hogan was now more well-known for bad things than good things, and the world turned its back. The worst part was that the words weren't made up. They were true and caught on camera. There was no way to take back what he had spoken in private. They had become public weaponry. Hogan got a huge payment after suing Gawker Media for invading his privacy. But it was too late to fix the harm to his legacy. He wasn't simply a humiliated wrestler. He was now in the news for all the wrong reasons. It was a total fall from grace for someone who used to stand for strength and honor. Winning in court couldn't bring back the love he had lost from his fans. Hogan didn't say anything after the trial. He stepped back from the public eye and stayed away from interviews. He used to be the face of a whole generation, but now he was just a shadow in the wrestling world. The medicines he endured for years of physical anguish only made his cerebral fog worse. He stopped working out, stopped smiling, and stopped thinking that the crowd would ever sing his name again. In 2020, Netflix is said to have offered him a biopic. He surprisingly said no. He told others that his story doesn't have a hero's ending, according to reports. That one statement said more than any press release ever could. It wasn't just about feeling bad. It was about a man who didn't know how his narrative really ended. Hogan's loneliness got worse. He didn't leave his house often and didn't trust many people. He had to deal with being Hulk Hogan, the ultimate decent man, for years. But Terry Bollea had to deal with the silence on his own when the mask fell off. He wasn't sure whether the fans would ever come back, and for the first time, he wasn't sure. Hogan's last days weren't loud or heroic. They were quiet, miserable, and kept from the world that used to love him. A quiet goodbye. Hulk Hogan's last public appearance was at a charity event in Clearwater, Florida, in April 2025. The man who used to fill stadiums stood calmly on a little platform, and many people in the crowd didn't even recognize him. Witnesses stated he seemed weak, with a pale complexion and a rigid walk that made even small steps seem agonizing. The muscles that used to make him famous were now just shadows of their previous size. People whispered, but Hogan just smiled, as if he was attempting to keep a part he no longer had the energy to play. For years, Hogan hid the damage his body had taken. Multiple back surgeries left him with limited movement, and nerve damage robbed him of strength in his legs. Every appearance became harder to get through. He used thick clothing to hide muscle loss, dark glasses to mask fatigue, and wide smiles to cover pain. But in Clearwater, for the first time, the illusion cracked in public. Behind the scenes, Hogan's health had taken a serious turn for the worse in early summer. He was dealing with spinal nerve compression, advanced muscle atrophy, and ongoing infections that left him exhausted. Even walking from one room to another drained him. He stopped answering calls and limited visits to only a few close family members. Hogan, who once fought through broken ribs and torn ligaments in front of cameras, now spends most days in bed. By mid-July, he reportedly asked to stop all treatments. Doctors say he knew what was coming and didn't want to fight anymore. Painkillers no longer brought relief. He barely ate. barely spoke. For someone who built his life on strength and toughness, those final days were quiet, slow, and full of reflection. On July 24th, Hulk Hogan passed away in his Florida home. There were no press releases, no final photos, no media circus. Just his two adult children and his longtime partner were standing silently by his side. No chants, no farewell tour, no grand send-off. It was the opposite of everything fans had come to associate with him. For a man whose persona was built on noise, color, and fireworks, this end was painfully still. It wasn't tragic in the way most celebrity deaths are. It was more of a slow fade. There was no accident, no overdose, no explosive headline. Just years of damage are finally catching up. And yet, somehow, that silence said more than any wrestling promo ever could. After his death, Hogan's family found a sealed envelope left on his nightstand. It wasn't addressed to his children, nor to his partner. It was meant for his fans. Inside was a short letter, written in his shaky handwriting. He thanked them not just for cheering him on, but for helping him feel like someone worth cheering for. The most powerful line read, "Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself." That single sentence revealed a side of Hogan few had seen: the weight of expectations, the cost of fame, and the cracks beneath the surface had all left their mark. It was a quiet, final message from a man who had given everything to stay larger than life, even when he didn't feel like he was. There was no grand funeral aired on television, no final entrance music, just a few private tributes, quiet statements, and tears from those closest to him. For the rest of the world, it took time to process the loss. This wasn't just the end of a wrestler. It was the end of an era. Hulk Hogan's death didn't shock the world with sudden news. It whispered its way into headlines and faded just as fast. But for those who followed his journey, the silence left behind spoke volumes. No arena lights, no raised fists, no victory poses, only the memory of a man who once ruled the ring, now gone with little more than a goodbye. We cheered for a hero, but missed the real story, a man torn between who he was and what he became. The truth Hulk Hogan took to his grave. Hulk Hogan was more than just a wrestler. He changed the way people saw the sport. He turned simple matches into sold-out stadium events and became a global icon. But behind the loud cheers and bright lights, something quieter was happening. His real life was slipping away. While fans saw strength, charisma, and energy, they missed the pain. Hogan's body was breaking down. His family life was crumbling. Fame gave him wealth, but not peace. What the world admired was just the character. Offstage, he was Terry Bollea, a man struggling with guilt, depression, and loneliness. Hogan and Terry were never the same. Hogan was unstoppable. Terry was human. He carried the pressure of staying larger than life, even when his body begged him to stop. He smiled on camera, but hurt deeply when alone. Years of pretending wore him down, and the more he played the part, the more he lost himself. The world wanted Hulk, so he gave it to them, over and over. But to survive, he had to become a cartoon version of himself. The bandana, the flexing, the catchphrases, it all became armor. Underneath, Terry was fading, trapped behind a mask he couldn't remove. Yet, behind closed doors, Hogan did things few knew about. He gave quietly to children's hospitals, visited sick kids, sat with injured soldiers, and mentored young wrestlers with patience. He never sought cameras. He only wanted to feel like a real person again. These acts didn't erase his mistakes, but they showed something more honest than the spotlight ever could. In his final years, Hogan kept private journals he never shared. He called them "the man I couldn't be." They were filled with regret. Regret over not being a better father, husband, and friend. The world saw the legend, but his writing revealed the man who felt like a stranger in his own story. He wasn't searching for applause anymore, just peace. In the end, Hogan gave wrestling everything: his body, his joy, even his identity. His death didn't just mark the end of a star, it marked the loss of someone who never got to fully be himself. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Click on the next video popping up on your screen for more amazing content.